Hi there, Section 14. I don't know if you realize this, but sometimes I try to start these vids and I suck at it, and I have to restart them, and I sometimes swear, even though I'm not a profane person, and I'm just wishing now that I'd collected all the outtakes. And maybe that's what this is like anyway. But anyway, heck, it's April 12th. We got to keep going here. And to say an obvious thing, it looks like Minnesota has decided, if it has a consciousness, that spring is unnecessary, superfluous this year. Why not just skip spring and let's just go from winter to summer? And got an awful lot on my mind, and we'll start with just some business notes. The school year is winding down like a tired clock, and I got to keep this class at least vaguely in sync with Staples Motley. And I'm not going to call them your sister class anymore. Maybe we'll call it the cousin class. And get a little dinosaur here in my hand, so I got something to fiddle with. I've got a lot of nervous energy. So here's the deal. I drove up to Staples yesterday. Beautiful day for a drive. And I taught, I think, an okay class, a decent class for them. I'm going to be there one more month, and I'm probably going to be saying goodbye to that high school. Not retiring. I just got to get back to my perfect schedule, Monday, Wednesday, Friday for next year. And then the thing is, today they had early dismissal there. They have early dismissal once a month. And so I had no class for them today. And I won't have a class for them tomorrow. Tomorrow, I will be in the afternoon winging my way to the big airport to pick up Maya C. Popa, because her poetry reading is Friday, and much business appertaining to that. Day started early with me talking to KAXE Radio, the hipster community radio station for all the hipsters, all the cool people in the northeast quadrant of Minnesota. So I love talking to you about poetry. I love talking to just a class about poetry. Anyone walking by, any stranger. But when I get the opportunity to talk to thousands of people about literature and poetry, it's a pretty good opportunity for me. So we'll have one video this week. Your main learning going on, especially because it's an online class, is in what you're reading. And if you're not doing the reading, I can't help you. So get going and start up The Great Gatsby by Scott Fitzgerald. So that's our business notes. Here's I want to kind of do mainly what I did today. I've got an intro for you today that I used to get my Comp 2s and my humanities class going. That class is going so wonderfully. All of my classes are, I think. And what I want to model is more chain reaction thinking, right? I last was doing that when I was talking about that crazy ziggurat, that structure in a rock that I'd never heard of, and that woman who probably started literature, Ndundwana. That's one thought leads to another kind of stuff. And I've got something similar today to put before you. And it has to do with some books that I got Monday at CLC. And we'll talk about that. I want to tell you a couple things about The Great Gatsby. And I think the principal thing that I want to do today is talk about narration. Because we have an opportunity to do that now. Because unlike the first things I had you read by Ernest Hemingway, which were written in third person, you have a narrator here. You have someone talking to you. And his name is Nick Carraway. And this gives us a chance, it gives me a chance to communicate. It's just remarkable. I just love talking about this stuff. I don't want to wreck literature by overanalyzing it. That's why I would never teach a class in literary criticism, right? Those guys are often astronomers who haven't even looked at the stars. But I do like to, kind of peek under the hood once in a while and help my students year after year understand some basic things about how literature works. And it's theoretical, but I don't think it's that difficult. I see students nodding every time when I go into this mode, because it's helpful. And you can just pick up a book and read it as a story, but why not learn a little bit about the techniques behind the creation of it? So anyway, you'll have one video this week. If this gets a little bit longer, you'll just forgive me. So the origin story here is Anya Backlund of Blue Flower Arts contacted me not too long ago, about a week and a half ago. I get a lot of poets from her, and also from the Barclay Agency in California. And she was like, hey, would you like a book maybe by Camille Dungy, who I'd never heard of. Camille Dungy, Anya told me, is going to be at Macalester College this October. and she's got a beautiful book out. And sometimes they think like that, right? The rep will go, wait, who else is in Minnesota? Jeff Johnson. I could call him, and maybe they'll share the poet, and split travel costs and stuff. It's a way to go. I've done it more than once. I'm doing it in a big way this fall for a big project involving 3 colleges, especially mine. So I said, hey, thank you. And by the way, why don't you send me other books of poetry? What do you have sitting there that is not nailed down? So she sent me a playful email back and said, hey, you got a second care package on the way. So we had an unboxing in my classroom, a couple of, I've seen those on the internet. I know how they work. And it makes my students happy. And there were some beautiful books. I got the book by Camille in an envelope. Then I got a little box that had another 6 or 7 beautiful hardcover poetry books. And here's my chain reaction thinking. Now, last week, I wanted to visit and meet a poet in Little Falls at the Carnegie Library there. Because a poet was going to be there named Su Huang, who's a Chinese American poet who lives in Minneapolis, I think, or St. Paul, Minneapolis. And of course, it got canceled. Everything got canceled last week because of that ice storm, and now it's almost 80 on my farm. So I didn't get to meet her, and I'm like, dang. And that would have been an easy stop for me because Little Falls is exactly between my home and my college, smack dab in the middle. I stop there sometimes to get yummy stuff at that Colburn's for my wife and I to eat. So, I kept moving, and then these books come, and I pick up this book by Michael Klebber-Diggs called Worldly Things, and I read on the dust jacket that he teaches poetry and creative nonfiction through the Minnesota Prison Workshop. And I'm like, wait a minute, really? I've kind of been interested in teaching at a prison for a long time, since Deborah Appelman, one of the biggest names in Minnesota English education, told me a long time ago at Carleton College on a long walk. She said, you have not lived until you've taught poetry in a maximum security prison. She does it at Stillwater every chance she gets, and she's in the faculty at Carleton. And so I look at that, and then I Googled this. I went and looked at the webpage for the Minnesota Prison Writers Workshop, and then I see that Su Huang is also works with this, and I'm like, this is it. The universe is giving me a message. And I fired out an email to both Michael KlebberDiggs and Su Huang. You guys, this is my new chronic thought. I want to teach. I'm not leaving my day job. Don't worry about that. I'm not going to retire for a while, but I do want to teach in a prison. I want to teach poetry to axe murderers. Man, they deserve poetry too. And where do I want to do it? I want to do it at the St. Cloud Reformatory with the help of Sue and Michael KlebberDiggs. I told them I would do it for nothing. I'm not looking for money. I have enough of that. And as you can maybe guess, my wife is unhappy about this. She is unhappy. She thinks this is not a thing I should be doing. But there you go. We got to have a little poetry to get things going here today. So let's. That's my new chronic thought. Let's begin with a Michael KlebberDiggs poem. The number 14 has been jumping out to me in the world. There's another message that I'm getting. This is a poem about a 14-year-old boy. I'm reading Dante, which makes you kind of superstitious about numbers. And it makes me think that I see that number everywhere. The 14 stations of the cross, etc. And the poem has an F-bomb in it, and I'm not going to read the F-bomb. It's going to be implied, because this class, like all of my classes, are rated PG-13. Profanity is a problem, I think, and yet it's human. It's part of language, right? So I'll just kind of half say it. Michael KlebberDiggs, end of class. Black boy in the back seat of a cop car across the street from my daughter's junior high. Hands cuffed behind his back. Hard to see him like that. It's an attractive afternoon here among the thriving. Snow glistening, sun descending on the best block in the city. I have friends who live nearby, so I'm sure I fit right in with the rich folks and professors. But him? He's barely surviving the day. He looks at me from his sick situation as if to say, F your pity. Canary in a coal mine, Negro in the pipeline. His life is full of cages. He's in the wrong system too soon, tragedies intertwining in the rearview mirror. I meet my target's own skin and sigh. I'm angry, chagrined. until my sweet kid climbs in next to me, as happy as she can be, before I point to the scene to ask what that boy did. Oh, Felix. He's pretty cool. Sometimes he can be mean. I think he's on probation. That's all she has to say. I pat her arm, start the car, and then we drive away. Our hearty home is not that far from here. I hosted a number of black poets, people with brown skin too, so we can learn about their lived experience. And Kevin Young will probably have something to say about what it's like to be black in this country. I only can understand it through poetry. I use poetry to fight racism. I've hosted a few. Terrence Hayes, Major Jackson, Tracy K. Smith, Chris Abani last November, and then the year before, in the same month, his dear friend, the Jamaican-American poet, Kwame Dawes. And can't wait to get these poetry readings to people, and can't wait to start up my series for year 14. Excuse me, no, year 12. That's what's happening. It's my 14th year at the college. It'll be the 12th year of the series next year. So just a couple things about the Gatsby. F. Scott Fitzgerald wrote this during a time of great wealth and prosperity. I'm sorry to report to you that typically that happens after great wars, right? It happened after World War I, it happened after World War II. The war's over, the fighting stops, industry retools itself. I wouldn't pretend to understand it. I don't understand. I'm not an economist. But just, it's safe to say there was like a chicken in every pot in the 20s. That was the deal. Until a horrible stock market crash that happened in the year 1929, October. And there really were, it's not a metaphor, there really were businessmen jumping out of buildings that year in New York City. It was a catastrophe, and it affected this country in a horrible way. My mom, when she was a little girl, she's still alive, her family ended up homeless. They ended up living with one of my mom's uncles in Wisconsin for a while, until my grandfather Francis, who was a maniac, pulled it together. So, jazz age novel, right? You can hear the saxophone in this. It was sort of the precursor to the guitar, the electric guitar. And I say this every year when I'm teaching Jay Gatsby. Every night, my guitars dream that they're saxophones. Just one other thing, a couple other things, and then we'll talk about narration. I don't know if you know this, but when publishers have a new title, one of the things that they have to do, publishing houses have to calculate how many copies they want to print. And if it's a smaller book, they might start out with 1,000, 1,500. And if they sell, well, then there's a second printing, a second edition. And that's why I can't believe I didn't show you this. You're the only class, the Staples kids aren't going to see this. If you ever pick up a book like this one, Hemingway's For Whom the Bell Tolls, and there's only 1 year, then that means it's a first edition. And I've got a few of these. This thing's worth about $800. Why would you sell a first edition for money? That's crazy talk. So Scribner's Maxwell Perkins was so excited about The Great Gatsby that they printed 20,000 copies. Fun fact, they didn't sell. America was just like, who cares? They sat on the shelves of drugstores and bookstores, and nobody wanted the book. And here's the sad part. I think it's a little sad. F. Scott Fitzgerald wanted to be wealthy his entire life. That's a lost generation writer that wanted money, and he never got it. He worked his butt off, especially writing over 150 short stories to keep the lights on. And the book was remaindered. You've never heard that word before, and you may never hear it for a while anyway. Remaindering means the publisher says, okay, let's collect all the books back. And then they take them back to the publishing house, and they put them, this is so sad to me, they take the books that did not sell, and they put them in giant vats. And they throw the books in, and they dump chemicals in, and just imagine a giant egg beater situation. And those books are turned into something called a slurry. And the slurry of the book that's being destroyed is used to make other books. So you maybe know where the story's going. Fitzgerald dies, goes face down in a typewriter at the age of 43 years old. And America, right about then, looked up and went, hey, this is a great American novel. What the heck are we doing? And it's, you know, this is, it has sold tens of millions of copies since then. And so Fitzgerald got very wealthy, but he was dead, wasn't he? You know, we have a thing called posthumous fame. We could call that posthumous wealth. This is a Minnesota book, too, because F. Scott Fitzgerald, oh, my wife just texted me. She's doing something in Sauk Center. I can't believe I showed you that. Wow, I hit the wrong button, and now there's like an extreme close-up of a woman's head. I'm focusing. The dinosaur will help. There's little bits of Minnesota wrapped up in this book, and I want you to know that. You gotta look carefully, listen carefully to it as you read. He left Minnesota. He broke our heart, and it took some years before we fell back in love with him and renamed the Orpheum Theater. We got mad at him in the same way Hibbing got mad at Bob Dylan, in the same way Grand Rapids got mad at Judy Garland, in the same way that Sauk Center, Minnesota got mad at I'm blanking on his name, Sinclair Lewis, one of the only Minnesotans who's won the Nobel Prize. Here's what I really want to talk about for a few minutes. We have a fantastic opportunity here to think about narration. And when I was talking to the Staples kids yesterday, yeah, they were, you know, the riot act to them had been read about a narration. We teach 7th, 8th graders and 9th graders that we have several voices that can tell stories. Third person, which enlists the they. Second person, which is tricky, which enlists the you. And first person narration, which enlists the I. And you'll probably remember that we have a couple kinds of third person narration, limited and omniscient. Yes, this matters, and I don't think it was dumbed down for you, but I think narration gets a little bit more complicated than that. It just simply is. And here's a way of thinking about narration. When you pick up The Great Gatsby, it's slow going too. That's what Staples kids said to me yesterday. They're a couple, 3 chapters in, and they're like, whoa, at first it was like, this is molasses, but then it starts to howl and move a little bit. And there's Freytag's, Professor Freytag's famous diagram again, right? Rising action, big moment, falling action, denouement. So every kid learns that. But someone's talking to you, but he's not really addressing you. I don't feel addressed when I read The Great Gatsby. Nick Carraway just kind of heads out. We'll talk about this a little bit later, the idea of being conscious or an unconscious narrator. But he starts out with that famous first sentence. You know, in my younger and more vulnerable years, my father gave me some advice that I've been turning over in my head ever since. And it's almost kind of boring. And just if I could just keep talking about literature, it's my favorite thing. Great writers are able to control space and time and distance. And one of the things that I've noticed about page 1 of this novel, I counted them years ago, there are the occurrences of 14 personal pronouns, the I and the you. There's other novels, and that keeps us at bay, right? That's not very many. Meanwhile, if you pick up Holden Caulfield's first page in The Catcher in the Rye, written by one of the most reclusive nuts in American literature, J.D. Salinger, whoa, he pulls you really close. And there's like 28, exactly twice the number of first and second person pronouns. But here's where it gets, I think, fascinating to me. Now take a look at this diagram. Ready for some more fantastic art from Jeff Johnson? This is how I've been trained to think about writing. And I should cite my source here. It is the great Wayne C. Booth in just an absolutely fantastic book about literature called The Rhetoric of Fiction. He explains to me that what happens is a writer sends forth a voice. He puts on a kind of mask and sends forth an implied writer, right? Otherwise, we don't have literature. In the same way that Huckleberry Finn is an implied writer, an implied storyteller, unleashed by Mark Twain. F. Scott Fitzgerald here is speaking. It's not a puppet show, but he is, in a sense, speaking through Nick Carraway. So we have the writer that is Fitzgerald, we have the implied writer that is Nick Carraway, and then we have the text, which is the novel. I love thinking about this because the writer can't hide completely. That's a rule. If the writer hides, we don't have anything. We've got nothing. And I think it is absolutely fascinating to look for the writer's thinking buried within, or revealed, that'd be a better way to put it, within the implied narrator. And I'm always fascinated by the idea of where the writer leaves off and where the implied writer picks up. I always feel like this is my final thought for today, I always feel like I don't quite explain this. Like it's not the greatest drawing in the world, but it's just a way of conceiving of it. The idea is not original, but the drawing is. That's my original artwork. And here's where it gets a little bit trickier. You've maybe never thought this way. In the same way that the writer sends forth an implied writer, we too send forth an implied reader that is kind of us and also not us at the same time. And the only way, a way to think of this is a couple examples, and I used one yesterday. I had one of my Salcedo, I got a couple twins in Staples, and I asked one of those Salcedo boys, I used him as the example, and I said, okay, look, you could pick this book up, and it's you. Of course it's you. You'd look in the mirror and go, that's me. But maybe you're reading the novel with a headache, and maybe a few days later you pick up the novel without a headache, and suddenly it's a better book, right? It's you, but it's a different version of you than the version that picked it up with the headache. See the game? You don't think of like this. So you're all so young. You don't think like this. You get up in the morning and you look in the mirror and you say, that's me. Here I am. What's really true is that you are a succession of selves, an endless succession of selves moving through time. And I'll end this video with myself as the example. When I was a young man reading this novel for the first time, I'm sure I cheered on Jay Gatsby. I'm like, you're doing the right thing. Go for it. Go for it. You're in love. You're in love. Do what's necessary. Necessity dictates. Well, why did I think like that with my kid brain? Maybe because I was stealing my best friend's girlfriend. Okay? Because I was fixing to marry her, and I did. And I just showed you where she is. She's up the road up in Sauk Center doing something Catholic with a bunch of women. We'll tick 37 years of marriage in September. Well, I've read this novel more than once. I've taught it for decades. And now when I pick up this novel at the age of 63, I'm watching a man steal another man's wife. And I'm thinking, dude, this is not a very good idea. And we'll talk about this a little bit further later. The trick of the novel is that not only can writers control space, time, and distance, they also can control our sympathies and what we're empathetic about. And you'll notice real quick in the novel, Tom, I'm sorry, let me use vernacular language. He's a complete dick. He's a jerk. He's a jerk. And the novel doesn't work if Tom's a good guy, right? And that's, I'm not saying we're being pranked, but we are being manipulated. I don't like that word either. We're being delightfully artistically messed with. So that's my video. I'm at 23:10. Let's cut this right now, and I'll get this edited and up for you. I warned you about this warm weather. Don't drive too fast. I don't want to give the safety talk twice.